Hi everybody, it's Mr. Han, and this week we're starting in on some optics stuff. So earlier in the lesson you might have learned a little bit about how a light interacts with objects, what light's made of, how light's created. Now we're looking at very specifically how we perceive light and how we perceive color in particular. So hopefully by the end of this lesson you'll understand how we see color and from a scientific perspective. So remember that white light is actually all the colors of the rainbow joined together. And that if we were to pass that white light through a prism like we see here, okay, we can actually separate that white light into the colors of the rainbow. Okay, and we would have done this in class had we been in class. And if we pass it through another prism, we could actually rejoin those colors and we could actually form white light. So a couple things that we can kind of take away from this prism thing is that white light is actually all the colors of the rainbow, and that those colors can be added again to form white light. And this is where additive color theory comes from. So, something that we need to be aware of right off the start is that white light is made of this rainbow of colors, so all the colors, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Okay, we remember this by saying this quick little acronym, ROY G BIV. Tells you the colors, the 7 colors in order. So red having the largest wavelength down to violet that has the smallest wavelength. That gives you all the colors in order. So if we were to look at like an object like an apple under white light, maybe that light's coming in from like a window or it's like an overhead light, like a light bulb, okay, it's really, one way to think about it is it's actually all the colors of light hitting it at once. Now the thing about an apple is on the surface of that apple it has this skin, okay, and we perceive that skin to be red. The reason we perceive it to be red is because there's pigments there in that skin. Those pigments are going to absorb all the other colors except for red. And so we see the apple as red because the apple reflects red light. It doesn't absorb red light, it reflects red light. So it's going to absorb all the purples and the blues and the greens and the yellows, but it will reflect that red light into our eyes, and that's why we perceive the apple to be red. Okay, same thing with the green pepper over here. Same deal, okay, again, imagine we have white light coming in from a window or from a light bulb. It's hitting that green pepper. We perceive that pepper as being green, okay, so our eyeball's up here and we're looking at it, okay, we see it as being green because what that green pepper is going to do on the surface of that green pepper, again, you have all these pigments, okay, in the surface of the pepper. They're chemicals, okay, those chemicals are attuned to absorbing the purples and the blues and the reds and the yellows, okay, and the only thing that they don't absorb is green, and the green gets reflected back into our eye, and that's why we perceive the green pepper as being green. And this is sort of the basis of color theory. And the reason this all happens is if we take a quick look at the anatomy of our eyeball. So what I have here is a cross section of our eye. Okay, so this is your eyeball kind of cut in half down the middle. Okay, so here's the front of your eye here. Here's the back of your eye here. At the back of your eye, you have your retina. You've maybe heard of things like retina display on Apple products, for instance. Okay, when they're talking about retina display, they're talking about the retina here in the back of your eye. Okay, and at the back of your eye there, you also have some cells, some very specialized cells. You have cone cells and rod cells. So rod cells help you sort of perceive depth and contrast and light and dark. Okay, they kind of give you like the outline to shapes. Cone cells, on the other hand, are what give you the apprehension of color. Okay, and you have 3 types of cone cells. You can see blue, you can see red, and you can see green. Okay, we can only see 3 primary colors. We don't actually have any other color receptors. For some people, these red and green ones have difficulty differentiating. That's where we get sort of red-green color blindness. Okay, that's a mutation in those cells. And some people actually have sort of the additional cone cell that allows them to see just a little bit into the ultraviolet spectrum. Okay. When we see something, like a green pepper for instance, what happens is that light is going to travel through our eye. Okay, so light is going to come in through our lens, through our pupil, to the back of our eye like this. Okay, and it actually does a little bit of distorting on its way there. But let's say it just goes straight back like this. Okay, it is going to hit the back of your eye. And these cells, what's going to happen is it is going to activate that green one, and that green one is then going to send a message to your brain saying, I perceive green. Okay, these other 2 are going to stay turned off. Okay, and that's how your brain knows that you're seeing green. Okay, now we could go through this situation again for like the red apple. So let's imagine we're looking at the red apple now. Okay, same deal. Now when that light comes through, okay, because it's a red apple, boom, it's going to hit this one, and that's going to activate, send that signal to your brain through those neurons, and it's going to activate in your brain saying, I'm seeing something red. So that's the biology of it. So if we were to look at like this block right here, okay, it's kind of got blue-green color, we call it cyan, okay, so that's cyan. Okay, your blue and green cells are firing at the same time to give you that cyan color. Okay, if you look at this one at the bottom, that's sort of hot pink or pink purple or even the light pinks, the dusty roses, okay, those are all part of the magenta family. And so magentas, when you're seeing these magentas, you're seeing these pinks, you're seeing these sort of dusty rose colors, all the way up to purple. What's happening is your red and blue cells are being fired at the same time. Okay, so there's actually three primary colors of light. We see red, green, and blue. Those are the three primary colors of light, and we can see any other color by adding varying amounts of these to each other. So what you'll see in the lab this week is you're going to get a red, green, and blue light bulb, and what you're going to do is vary how much red and green and blue are turned on, and that will allow you to create lots of different colors, and you'll see how the sort of the relationship between, you know, lowering the red and raising the blue, or raising the blue and raising the green at the same time. You'll start to see the relationship between them as you work through the lab. Okay, so when anytime you add any of these two primary colors together, what you end up with is called a secondary color. Okay, so when we mix red and green, this is kind of the funniest one, you get yellow. That one's pretty hard to sort of interpret in our mind. This would have been great to see in the lab, because what I do is I give you green filters, red filters, we mix the light together, and you actually see that you get yellow. When you get green and blue mixed together, you get that cyan color, like I said before. That one's pretty obvious. Red and blue, again, pretty obvious. You get that magenta color. So oftentimes the way we memorize this is with the color wheel. So I put red there, and I'll put green there, and I'll put blue there. And my color wheels, whenever I mix green and blue, I get cyan. Whenever I mix red and blue, I get magenta. And whenever I mix red and green, I get yellow. Whenever you mix them all together, then you get white. Okay? And so what you can see here is actually if I mix cyan and red, then I will also get white. If I mix green, okay, with magenta, then I get white, and if I mix blue with yellow, I get white. And this is how pixels work on your screen. So whether it's on your Chromebook or your cell phone or your iPad, okay, your television, if you zoom in on the picture, if you were to look at like your cell phone under the microscope, and we would do this in class as well, we'd fire up some Instagram, look at the Instagram photos under the microscope, and what you would see is that you're not actually looking at a photo, you're actually looking at light bulbs. Okay, so if we zoom all the way in, what you actually notice is that it's just a red, green, and blue light bulb in a pattern like this. There's a variety of different patterns. Every cell phone manufacturer, tablet manufacturer, phone manufacturer has their own pattern, okay, but then they just repeat those patterns, and by turning varying amounts of each of them on and off, what you end up having is an image of someone's eye. Okay, so you can see that where they have them all turned on, that's where you're getting the white. Okay, where you have them all turned off, that's where you're getting kind of that black color. Okay, black is the absence of light. And then here in the skin, you can see they're using varying amounts of each one, okay, in order to get that different hue of skin color and shade in here a little bit. So they're turning varying amounts of them on and off in order to get those colors. So let's look at some examples. So one of the ways that we can create light bulbs is by creating what are called screens, filters. And so what a filter does is it allows only certain colors of light through. So think about, like, the best way to think about them is like Christmas light bulbs. Okay, Christmas light bulbs, you can actually see the plastic coating around them. And let's say I had a pink Christmas light. Okay, it would only allow the colors that would make pink through, and it would absorb all the other colors. So inside that ball, inside the light bulb, inside the coating, you have a bulb. It'd be right there, and it's producing white light. In order to make it magenta, we pass it through that filter, that plastic coating that's on the outside. Okay, and so what happens is if something looks magenta to me, what that means is it must be letting the red light through and the blue light through, because red and blue make magenta. And so then I would see magenta on the other side. Now, if I put two filters, one in front of the other, what will happen is each one will kind of do its own thing. So that magenta filter again, okay, it lets through the red light. So the red gets through, the blue gets through, okay, because magenta is made of red and blue. Okay, now I have a cyan filter. Cyan is made of blue and green. Now the green got blocked right here, so there's no green anymore. So by having those two filters together, I can actually get blue light to come out. And that's how you make like a blue filter. Okay. One of the other things that we can do is we can mix colors of light. So we can actually use like the pixels in our screen. Okay, we can use mixtures of colors by turning those light bulbs on and off in order to create a new color. Okay, so let's say here I had green and magenta light bulb on. Okay, so the green would come in here. Okay, magenta is going to come in here. Remember, magenta is red and blue plus green. Red, green, and blue, when you add them all together, you get white. Okay, and this next one. Now I got a red light bulb on and a blue light bulb on, and so what I would see then is magenta as the color on the screen. Now, subtractive color theory, it sounds like it's a different theory, but it's actually the same. It's the same theory, but it helps you kind of figure out how to mix inks or pigments together in order to get colors to appear on like a material, like fabric, like clothing, for instance, like dyes on clothing, like color printers. Okay, like tattoo artists have to be able to do this, classical artists have to be able to do this. They have to have sort of an understanding of, when you mix these two colors together in varying amounts, what's my resulting color going to be. Okay, so when I look at like a pigment, like a magenta pigment, okay, what I'm actually seeing is red and blue being reflected off of there. Okay, it's going to look magenta to me because it's reflecting red and blue light and it's absorbing green light. So this kind of goes hand in hand with additive color theory, because this magenta ink that I have here is absorbing the green light, which I kind of thought it would, and it's reflecting red and blue light also like I thought it would from additive color theory. Okay, when I come over here to my cyan dot, okay, if it looks cyan to me, that must mean it's reflecting blue and green light into my eye, and that's why it looks cyan to me. Okay, the yellow dot down here, okay, it's reflecting red and green and absorbing that blue light, and again, that absorbed light is becoming heat. Okay, so for instance, let's say I had a black dot here, and it's a sunny day. Okay, so there's my black dot. I got red light coming in and blue light, okay, and green light coming in and hitting that black dot. It's not going to reflect anything. So when we see black, what we're actually seeing is the absence of color. And people are hard at work trying to figure out how to make the blackest material possible, the one that will reflect the least amount of light. So a black dot, like a black sweater or like a black cell phone case, okay, or maybe like a black Chromebook, we do know that it reflects some light. The pigments on the surface aren't perfect, and so it's going to reflect some light. When you look at the videos for this week, you'll see there's one on Vantablack, which absorbs a huge amount of light, almost reflecting none of it. Okay, so black again is kind of this absence of light. We know that it will reflect some light, but not enough to register as a color. And so we actually see that it absorbs all those colors. That's why like a black t-shirt on a sunny day gets very warm. It's absorbing all those colors of light and turning them into heat. So in order to get colors using subtractive color theory, we start with the three primary subtractive colors. And again, if we look over at like my printer example here, whenever you get a color printer refill, you get three colors. You get magenta, you get cyan, and you get yellow. Okay. The reason for that is with those three primary ink colors, you can make any other color. Okay, and so again we have these color wheels for subtractive color. So it goes cyan, yellow, and magenta. Okay, and the colors that are in between them are the color that they share. So cyan is blue and green, magenta is red and blue, so when I mix them, they give me blue. Okay, cyan is blue and green, yellow is red and green. When I mix those, I get green. Okay, and yellow is red and green. Okay, magenta is red and blue, and so when I mix those, I get red. Okay, so if I want to make like a red ink, I mix a little bit of yellow and a little bit of magenta, and I get a nice red ink. Let's say I want to print a picture of the blue ocean. I'd need a little bit of magenta and a little bit of cyan in order to make a nice blue color. Okay, now when you mix all the colors of ink, then you get black. Okay, and you may have noticed this with your printer before too. Sometimes when you run out of black ink, the printer will prompt you on your computer screen to say, hey, I notice you're out of black ink, but you still have your colors left. Do you want to use your colors now to print in black and white? I find it best to have your color wheels up. So have your subtractive color wheels up and your additive color wheels up, okay? And then use those to try to help you problem solve what the answer to the question is. So when you go to do the final quiz for this week, have your color wheels just kind of handy, have them beside you, okay? And then when a question comes up and it says, okay, I'm going to mix some cyan ink with some yellow ink, you can just say, okay, when I mix those two, I get green ink, okay? Or if it's light, you go back to your light wheels, and it might say, like, what happens if you mix red light with blue light? Okay, you're going to get magenta. You would just use your color wheels in order to solve that. If you have any questions about this week's work, please feel free to send me an email. We are going to do the lab on gizmos and the short quiz at the end. Thanks. Okay, so let's look at an example. If I want to print out a picture of blue ocean on my printer, what two inks must I use in order to do that? Okay, so I would use magenta, okay, and I would use cyan, and I would mix them together in two dots. Okay, so it would look like this. I would do a magenta dot and then a cyan dot on top of that. And so what would happen there by mixing those two colors together, the cyan would reflect blue and green, okay? The magenta would reflect blue and red, okay? The magenta would soak up the green from the cyan would soak up the red from the magenta, and so by mixing those two colors together, the only color of light that would bounce off is blue. I always Let's say a tattoo artist wants to make a nice red color for a tattoo of a Canadian maple leaf. What colors of ink would they use? Okay, so you'd use magenta, which has some red in it, and yellow, which has some red in it. And again, you'd mix those two into two dots, one on top of the other, and mix them together. Okay, so you put magenta and yellow. And so what would happen is the magenta would reflect red and blue, the yellow would reflect red and green, okay, and they would cancel out or subtract the two colors that aren't in common, and the only color that would be left reflected is red. So that's color theory in a nutshell. What happens is when you go to try to do one of these